So let's welcome on stage then our moderator, Sandeep Ethel of the Infosys Innovation Fund, who has been with Infosys playing various roles across India, Europe, and the US. He now looks at strategic investments in the Infosys Innovation Fund, the strategic CVC arm of Infosys, focusing on startups, VC funds across deep science, deep tech, and enterprise. Thank you for being with us today, Sandeep. Do have a seat. We've also got joining in as a panelist Samir Kumar, GP Athera Venture Partners, with over 20 years of experience in early stage investing. He's led investments in the technology space. Prior to that, he's worked with Acer Technology Ventures and spent over 15 years in the IT industry. Thank you for joining us. We've got Jatin Desai, GP Inflexer Ventures. He's a seasoned entrepreneur and investor with a passion for innovation and growth. As the managing partner of Parampara Capital, he oversees investments in early stage startups with a strong network and industry insights. And we've also got Madhav Joshi, who is the CEO at the India Health Fund. And this is a Tata Trust initiative that supports science, technology-based innovations for communicable diseases. He's previously led businesses at Pfizer, Abbott Nutrition, and Nestle. Over to you, gentlemen, for this insightful panel discussion.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is probably the most exciting session because all the investors are going to tell you how they invest. So either you be ready to give them equity or give them LP money. This is only a teaser. They work on a freemium model. They'll give you a teaser, and then for more, you have to give one of them. Thank you. So we'll start with a quick round of intro. Maybe I'll just start with Samir on, you can give a very high level overview of fund, thesis, a focus, some of the examples that you want to cover from your portfolio. So before we get started on, how do you actually see and invest?
So I'm a partner at Athera Venture Partners. We were known as Inventus Capital Partners earlier, been around since 2007, 2008, currently investing out of our fourth fund. Tech has been our focus all through, typically Series A. We started investing in what is called deep tech, and deep tech I think has different meanings for everybody. So I'll talk about my meaning when I start talking. But for the last 5-6 years, we've been doing investments in deep tech and have built a portfolio in space, electric vehicles, smart helmets, robotics, and so on.
Yeah, good that you covered this. So one of my uncles used to be a veterinary doctor. So for him, AI was artificial insemination. So it's better that we clarify some of the elements. So Jatin.
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, so my name is Jatin. I'm a partner at Inflexer Ventures. We started our VC journey in 2015 as Parampara Capital. So kind of like Samir's fund, we've also gone through a kind of a rebranding or a name change. We invest in tech IP, innovation-led, and deep tech companies from seed to Series A. I think since we are at IIT Bombay, SINE, one of our star portfolio companies happens to be Atomberg, which was incubated at SINE, IIT. Thanks.
Madhav?
So I represent India Health Fund, which is a catalytic fund from Tata Trusts. Tata Trust set up this fund with a particular focus on addressing challenges in public health which could not be solved through programs alone, and where science and technology had a role to play. But the investments in developing that science and technology were either too high or too risky for private capital. So that's why Tata Trust took the lead to set up a catalytic fund which provides grant funding only to early stage science and technology development, addressing public health challenges. We've got a particular focus on communicable diseases. And having lived through COVID, I think we can all now relate to the role innovation, science, and technology can play in addressing public health challenges. Our thesis is broad. We have big investments in diagnostics and screening tools, AI-enabled solutions, as well as molecular and rapid diagnostics.
Thank you. So probably we'll get straight away into the crux of the whole deep tech investment. So how do you invest? What's your playbook? So maybe you can start with the general thing and then probably one sector of your choice. I leave it to you.
So I think our playbook across sectors is the same. It is basically the entrepreneurial team and our assessment of whether this team can build a large valuable business that makes money for us and our investors. So very simply stated, that's the playbook. But when it comes to deep tech, we overlay a few more things on that. Of course, the team remains paramount. But given that we hadn't done so-called deep tech investing, so since you said definition and AI and what so on, in our heads, deep tech is what we don't understand. Then everything that we don't understand is deep tech. Okay, so we started doing deep tech 5-6 years ago and said, okay, so if we don't understand space or don't understand robotics, let us at least mitigate the risk to some extent by making sure that we invest in companies where software is still a dominant intelligence driver or the brain of that venture. So if I take just an example, Pixel, which is a hyperspectral satellite company, it's actually building satellites, sending them into space to take hyperspectral images of the Earth and monetize those images. Yes, they are building the satellites. You can touch, see, feel those things that, if you have good eyesight, you can see them in the sky. I'm kidding. But the monetization, the real value that that company will drive is coming from the software that they're building, the analysis of the images and so on. And that's what we look for in our deep tech investments. Hopefully, over a period of time, as we get more confident, we'll be able to do companies where software is not a key ingredient, like life sciences and so on. But currently, that's our filter.
And what's your playbook to raise money? Because some time back, you can't tell the LP that what I don't understand is deep tech and give me money.
So I have some LPs sitting in the room here. So I have to be careful about what I say. But no, I think we have been very disciplined in our approach to investing. Tech has been what we've done. All these things, whether it's satellite, whether it's Euler Motors, electric three-wheelers, whether Ati Motors, which is autonomous mobile robots, SINE, which is computer vision for robotic arms, they're all tech companies. The founders all come from strong tech backgrounds. And that is a theme that we look for. We don't want to have deep tech companies with no offense meant, with chartered accountants leading them. So we tell our LPs we are tech investors. We can't claim to understand all the spaces we invest in. But I think what we do is we have a wide network, given that we've been around for a long time. And when we did Pixel, we hadn't done any space company before that. 2020, we did that. We were quickly able to reach out to our network, reach out to people in ISRO and so on, to have a chat with them on what hyperspectral is, what are mini satellites, not microsatellites, and so on and so forth, and get comfort in that space. That's what we do.
Yeah. Thank you. So Jatin, sure. Playbook for investments and fundraising.
Sure. I think we are a sector agnostic fund. So, we have 3 funds currently, and we are now going to raise the 4th fund. So our definition of, deep tech is slightly wider. Of course, Samir covered obviously a large part of it. But for us, when we started Fund 1, the deep tech sector that we had identified, obviously those days AI was pretty deep tech. Now some aspects of AI have become mainstream, but so we had AI, we had robotics, we had augmented and virtual reality. We actually looked at a few quantum computing companies as well, early on. So these, and biotech, we have looked at, and then actually made one investment. And then within deep science, we have made a couple of investments. One in biomolecules for agri, and also a nanomaterial that would replace composite material like silicon, right? So we have portfolio companies in most of these sectors that I mentioned. And just to quote some examples, on the AR/VR side, we have a company called Play Shifu, which makes AR/VR enabled educational toys for kids. We actually, as I recollect, at least if not the first, one of the first VCs to invest in space tech in a company called Bellatrix, where of course we work closely with IIT Bombay, SINE, both for diligence, and SINE is also a co-investor with us in Bellatrix. We have an emotion AI company called Entropic, right, which does emotion analysis, multimodal. We have a predictive AI-based cybersecurity company called CloudSec, And on the nanomaterial side, we have a company called Nopo, which makes single-wall carbon nanotubes, right, which replaces composite materials. And we have a company called Bioprime, which does agri-biomolecules to increase crop yield, right? So these are some of the examples in our portfolio of deep tech. And since we are sectorally agnostic, a little bit all over the place, right? On the fundraising part, I think when we were raising our second fund, right, we actually started in Feb 2020, and March we had the lockdown, and then people saw how digitization and, some of the aspects of deep tech and, how and the remote working and, even doing sales on Zoom calls, right, globally, right? So I think people became very, very familiar, our potential LPs at that time, right? There was a lot of excitement around moving to the digital economy, and a big part of what, of course, was deep tech. And it was very fascinating. And in fact, to be very honest, it was almost a FOMO situation by the time we finished raising. And many funds like ours that raised fund during the VU actually overshot our target corpus. Yeah.
Thank you. That was kind of a quasi reverse pitch for both the LPs and the startups. Thank you, Jatin. Madhav.
So our whole playbook centers around addressing unsolved problems. And we do that by really curating problem statements and use cases in very close coordination with governments, foundations, and the private sector, not just in India, but around the world. Our philosophy is really India for the world. And you leverage Indian science, entrepreneurship, and solutions to solve problems that are relevant for all developing countries. With a very clear definition of problem statements and use cases, we then do the technology landscaping to identify what is the state of technology development which can potentially address the areas we're trying to solve for. Not all technology is early stage. So we sort of have a triage of what's ready, what needs development, and what's really early stage. So that also helps define the kinds of investments we make. So in very early stage technologies, we might provide seed to prove the technology relative to the use case that we're trying to address. For mid and late stage solutions, we're very happy to put funding down to not just develop and de-risk a product, but also then use it in public health settings to prove the efficiency and the efficacy, which then allows governments, multilaterals to scale it up. So to put a face to it, we were one of the first investors in AI for imaging. But the way that was used was to digitize analog chest x-rays, which we funded. We funded an algorithm that could read the chest x-rays, and for the last 3 years, we've been funding the deployment of this in 19 states across India to identify different use cases where tuberculosis patients can get early detection in their homes in the absence of a radiologist. And the results have been dramatic. People who had to wait 6 to 8 weeks sometimes to get a diagnosis are now getting diagnosis within seconds, which is putting them onto treatment, and that's saving lives. Sample transport is a big challenge, particularly because most samples need ambient condition or refrigeration. Cold storage in remote areas is broken. We're funding ambient sample transport solutions, which is actually doing 3 things. They're allowing for earlier sample collection and detection of patients. It's also helping reduce the carbon footprint of the supply chain, which is then also improving the green credentials of a lot of these companies and making them far more investable. And the third thing that it's doing is it's taking care closer to patients. So I think that's the way we look at solutions. What at early stage is something that we really like. So antigens that were developed in a lab here have been translated into a lateral flow test, which is now detecting tuberculosis at 200 rupees for patients within minutes. These are first of their kind solutions anywhere in the world. So that's the playbook that we offer. We're willing to take early risks with people who are willing to stay the course, but then solve public problems.
Yeah. Thank you. Your flexibility kind of helps you to double down on some of these and back them all the way, right? All right. So, I mean, if you look at 10 years back, so SaaS was the thing, right? And then slowly, probably around 5 years back, the whole deep tech started picking up, and it had a lot of challenges convincing people why we have to go deep tech beyond the platforms, marketplaces. So how have you seen the last 10 years of evolution? If you want to give a very quick and dirty overview for a lot of people, how your view of the last 10-year evolution of deep tech?
So I think for deep tech entrepreneurs, it has certainly become much easier to raise money now. Jatin has been doing this for a while. There's Speciale, there's India, there's Pi Ventures. There's Athera Venture Partners now and so on. So there's much more. I mean, just to give you, to make the evolution graphic, 15 years, and I've been in this business for 23 years, so I've seen it really evolve. But 8-10 years back, when I would meet entrepreneurs who were doing semiconductors or doing something really cutting edge, I would really love to sort of back them. I mean, my passion is in that space. Great entrepreneurs would love to back them, but there was no backing. I mean, when we went back to our team and our IC, great, everything is great, but who will do the next round funding?
So you're not doing it because nobody's doing it.
Because we can do this round, but they'll need to raise Series B, C, D. We are Series A, and we couldn't see that landscape of B, C, D investors, and therefore a lot of what in my view were good ideas weren't getting funded. So one big evolution is that fear is gone. The B, C, D guys, if the A guys have come like Jatin, us, Speciale, India, Pi, and so on, the B, C, D guys have also come. If I just give you an example, Ati Motors, which is making autonomous mobile robots. Think of Tesla cars, but used in factory shop floors to tug materials.
Seen them in Art Park.
You've seen them, right? So they've just signed a term sheet to raise, their Series B. Fortunately, unfortunately, whatever, it's still US investors who are leading that. But in India also, we are very clear you'll get the BCD guys coming soon. So that's one big evolution. So entrepreneurs who are working in this space don't have to fear now, are there investors and so on.
So now that's the game in town.
It's actually become the new buzzword.
Jatin, how do you see the evolution?
So I guess Samir has covered it very well, and he has obviously been a few years ahead of us in the whole VC journey as well. But I think, India has come a long way, even since our Fund 1, right? We've featured nowhere in the sort of the global map as far as overall, tech VC ecosystem was concerned, or overall VC ecosystem. I think as all of you know, we are now pretty much the number 3 ecosystem as far as startups are concerned. And even within the deep tech sector, now India is, the last I checked, was number 6 globally, right? So we have really from nowhere, showed up in number 3 and number 6 positions globally as far as the startup and the deep tech startup ecosystem is concerned. And, now there are a lot more investors, both domestic and global, who can follow on, taken. And I think, nothing succeeds like success ultimately. So I think since we have had some early successes, we have lots of, in fact, many of the follow-on rounds in our deep tech companies in the portfolio have come largely from global funds, but also from some domestic investors, who want to take some bets in deep tech. And now I see that, across the board, large or small funds, I think while, there is a segment where, the entire fund may be deep tech, but, we've seen at least, 10%, 20% allocation to deep tech, even from funds that were not investing in the deep tech sector before. So obviously, come a long way. Of course, still there is a long way to go, and I think it's part of the maturity cycle.
Yeah. So still the Series B and C, still we need more players, active players in Series B and C. Okay. So Madhav, how have you seen?
So look, I completely agree with what's just been said. We were originally set up as a fund for scale. But when we were set up, we found there's very little to scale.
So you have to come upstream.
So that's when we sort of applied part of our corpus to really create a pipeline. And the pipeline, as Samir and Jatin have said, is now evolving. But maybe to strike a contrary view, I think what we're seeing is the pipeline is getting biased by what's already happening. And we're seeing, I think, less out-of-the-box thinking, which is more problem-based, problem-solution-based. What we're seeing a lot of is the application of science to create something, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. And that, I think, will eventually lead to a lot of failures, because if you're not focused on what you want to solve for from the very outset, there will always be a challenge in terms of Series B, C, and scale eventually.
Thank you. So related question to all of you. So in the last 10 years, what is the positive surprise and a negative surprise in terms of segments?
Okay. So I think the positive surprise that I've seen is just the amount of entrepreneurial talent out there. And I think both the willingness and the creativity of a lot of our scientists as well as developers to, I think, apply their abilities and capabilities to create what we call bankable solutions. I think the negative surprise we've seen is the unwillingness to partner. And I sat through the previous session, and I think this is something one of the speakers there mentioned. People become very, very fixed on what their ideas and solutions are. There is a natural evolution that can and should happen very often to really make them scalable and market ready. And that calls for partnerships and collaborative approaches where not everybody has to do everything themselves. I think that to us has been a challenge in many cases.
Okay, all right. Jatin, what surprised you the most on both sides?
I think if I pick, let's say, a sector, right, that surprises, certainly I would say it's space tech, right? I think, again, from nowhere, when we invested in Bellatrix, this was, I think, around 2017 or so. I think there were like 7 or 8 space tech startups in India. It was very, very early days, And today, if you look at it, I think we have almost 200 startups. Of course, it includes both upstream and downstream, space tech startups. Many of them have space qualified their stuff, right? They've done successful testing. Some of them have even started commercializing, right? And remember, this is a sector where there is a long gestation period, right? At least when, we were, of course, a little apprehensive when we did our first space tech investment. I could not even imagine how it will, take off. Of course, again, on the commercialization and scale-up side, it still has to play out. But because, the R&D, the space qualification, the commercialization, it takes much longer than, let's say, a deep tech software startup. And obviously, I think the government of India's encouragement into all this, because, on the public sector side, obviously, whether it's a civilian use case or a military use case, you have to deal with the government. But the investment and the opportunities that have been given to startups, to participate in commercial contracts, has been, wonderful. So that certainly has surprised the most.
On the negative side?
On the negative side, if I take, let's say, example from our portfolio company, it's not purely deep tech, but we had taken a bet in an edtech company, right, with aspects of deep tech in terms of AR, VR, and a little bit of machine learning, if not directly AI. I think that whole sector, obviously had a sectoral problem with a lot of bad news and governance and all those issues. So I think that has slightly disappointed because it had a bit of scope, right? And I would connect that to kind of agentic AI in a way, right? I think, AI, as we have seen, 3 sort of, I'm a little bit off topic, but just, touching upon it, we had started investing in, predictive AI. Now we are doing Gen AI investments, right, from our fund. Obviously, the next phase is agentic AI, right? So we had thought some aspects of that would show up in edtech and all, for different levels, because a normal edtech software, may not work for a PhD or an engineering degree program or something like that. But I think that has been slightly disappointing. Yeah.
One of my mentors used to tell me this: natural stupidity is far more powerful than artificial intelligence. So we try to, underplay that risk, but in the real world, those risks can manifest, significantly. So one anecdote on space: around the same time, we were kind of giving some cash grants around 18, 19-ish. We've seen all of these names. And I happened to go to IIT Madras, where Agnikul was starting up. They just put up this little thing. It used to be called Rural Technology something, Business Incubator, RTPI. So I saw the board like, okay, some rural technology. I went inside, there was some, like you keep fireworks, right? All the sand in a bucket or something. I thought, it is too good to be true, what they're claiming. And I couldn't build conviction. Around 19-ish, right? 18, 19-ish. But even for me, it was a positive surprise. So, Samir, the positive and the negative surprises.
So on the positive surprise, I'll talk about the nature of entrepreneurs we are seeing and the big change in the deep tech entrepreneurs. So the gumption of entrepreneurs to solve crazy problems. When I say crazy, these are huge problems. These are global scale problems. These are audacious problems that they're solving. That has been a positive surprise for me. And I'll just give 2 examples. One is the pixel guys again. I mean, I don't know why we've invested. It turns out to be a very successful investment for us, has turned out to be. These are 2019 graduates. In December 2019, we write the term sheet for them, right? So, but they are extraordinary guys, and that's the positive surprise. Such young guys coming with so much of passion, with a business sense, with wisdom far greater than I had after 35 years of working, right? So that's the positive surprise. I'll take the other example is SINE, which we've just done. These are guys who've been in the computer vision domain for the last 11 years, worked in National Instruments for 4-5 years, started consulting in this space for the next 4-5 years, and then said, based on what we've learned, we've seen an acute problem in the manufacturing sector, and we are going to go out and solve it. And it's not a problem for India, it's a problem for the global scale. And they've cracked GM, Denso, and so on. So the audaciousness of the entrepreneur is a positive surprise. The negative surprise, and it will keep happening for us, is so yeah, we bet on some technology sort of taking off, and something else comes and disrupts it, which we were not able to see. We've had examples not in deep tech space, but we invested in Telebrahma. 3G, we were not able to foresee. It came, it decimated its market. That's a risk that I think will keep happening.
Yeah, the left field risk.
Yeah. We try our best to avoid it, but I think.
Okay, all right. So that's kind of a history. Then let's move on to what's the next 10 years journey that you guys can share with the audience. Probably people who want to build or getting into sectors where they think they can solve, where there's sufficient investor interest. So how do you see the next 10 years? What is the if you want to pick 3 segments that you're really bullish on?
So I'll answer that question, but I'll just step back and say that by and large, as a fund, we don't look for sectors or define the sectors. We believe that entrepreneurs are the closest to the ground, closest to the problem, and we look for entrepreneurs who've understood the sectors. But since you asked the question and I have to answer it, and you're the moderator, so
you can choose not to.
No, I think space, which Jatin mentioned, started off in 2017-18, then the space policy came and so on. We are going to see a lot more action there. I think we've just scratched the tip of the surface in that area. Quantum computing, I think, again, Jatin mentioned it. I think we are at the early days as a quantum policy and so on. In the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot more action in that space. And the way robotics is evolving, and this is something I hope I understand a little, because we've done some investments. With this whole humanoid thing and the potential it holds, it's very early. There's a lot of hype on this humanoid thing right now, but I think it is going to be transformative. Yeah. And then, of course, I don't want to talk about AI since you said 3, but that's going to be pervasive.
Yeah. No, I mean, the best way to learn things is just commit money. I mean, in the early days, it was, people used to tell me that if you want to really understand options, you have to trade and lose money. Then only you will understand what options are. But, no amount of reading can help you understand unless you commit money and get onto the company and you understand there are 100 ways things can go wrong. Right? Okay, so Jatin.
So I guess, some of the couple of sectors that I had in mind have already been covered by Samir, so I'll not repeat that. The additional thing I would add is, I think the whole biotech and deep science segment. So we have been tracking that last year or so, and we are sort of building some more conviction. But we see, and within that also, obviously, on the healthcare side, on the biotech, on the we are seeing a lot of startups with all these sustainability and food side of things, right? Like meat substitutes, etc. And third is on the agri and the composite material side in terms of deep science, right? So this and I think it's time for India to move on, from the whole generics thing to actually innovate more and something new coming out of India on the biotech side. There are already a few startups. Some are going through their phase 2 trials and approvals and all, at least as far as pharma is concerned. But I guess Madhav will have a much better sense on that side. But the nanomaterial side and the biotech side, the agri side, we are quite bullish.
Thank you, Madhav.
So I think 3 areas. One is adapting to the impact of climate change. It's real, it's happening, and it's not going to go away. Science and deep tech has a big role to play. Have we fully addressed that opportunity? We certainly haven't. The second one is addressing the impact of antimicrobial resistance. I don't know if most of you are aware, but we've got about 80% drug resistance in India already to many drugs. So the question I heard asked the other day was, when the drugs stop working, what will we do? And we're closer to that than we realize. And the third is around material science. Particularly going back to climate impacts, heat is a reality. Material science has a significant role to play in helping overcome heat risks.
Okay, thank you. So now another thing most of the people have that question is, how do you guys build the pipeline, right? And I mean, most of the times people make this observation. Most of the VC money, first they'll figure out exit and then they'll figure out entry, right? So how do you build that pipeline, and how do you start have that second question in your mind? It's kind of a pipeline for exit also, in a way.
So I think from a pipeline standpoint, places like SINE are a very important pipeline for us. In fact, yesterday also I was sitting here and talking about my journey with SINE and so on. So my venture capital career, SINE started together, and the reason I started visiting SINE is because they were the deal flow sources. But today there are far more. There are a lot of networks. We've been around for a long time. People refer deals. One of the deals we've done in Fund 4 with Inflexer, they were looking at it and they reached out to us saying, would you like to co-invest and so on, and we did click post together. So we've also built a network with like-minded VCs and so on. So that became, and we also refer. We don't do 99%, we don't do any investment on our own. We write a term sheet but then syndicate it. So like we did at Signler, we wrote a $2 million term sheet for a $8 million round and started syndicating it, shared our diligence material with other potential co-investors and so on. Ultimately ended up being a $10 million round. So sourcing is done through various ways. Our networks are wide, we reach out, we get referrals, etc., etc. Our own past entrepreneurs keep referring deals to us. Many of our successful past entrepreneurs are angel investors now. Some of their opportunities come to us. But the exit point is a very important point. I think it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. We have to get out of the investments after a period of time. Funds are close-ended funds. They have a limited life. It takes longer in India for a company to really scale and realize its value. Fund lives normally do not extend to that level. And so that's the constant pressure, tension, etc. But if we can't see an exit opportunity, no matter how good the business looks like, we do not invest. So it's not a reflection on the entrepreneur if we say no. I keep repeating that. It's a reflection on us and our limitations that we say no very often.
The two toughest jobs in the VC world is, you have to figure out 1,000 different ways to say no to a deal, and then you have to exit, whether you may not like it, but you have to exit at some point of time. So Jatin?
Yeah, I guess, as Samir said, we also work closely with incubators and accelerators like SINE, IISc, IIT Madras and the likes. In fact, most of our deep tech sourcing has been either out of such incubators, accelerators, or fund network, right? As we said, we co-invest together along with other funds. So that I would say is pretty much 100% of our deep tech sourcing. And then obviously, when we have a portfolio of deep tech founders, they also refer other founders, right? So these are the primary sources. In terms of exit, of course, with the caveat that, of course, VCs go wrong more than we go right, despite of all this diligence and saying so many no's, etc. And the time it takes to scale. At least from our perspective, one of our pre-investment diligence is exit-related diligence, especially when it comes to deep tech or tech IP, where we would identify, make sure that the IP is good, because sometimes or many times these companies may or may not scale, right? Unlike on the consumer side where it has to scale, right, to have a meaningful exit. On the deep tech or the tech IP side, if you build meaningful IP that is relevant to, let's say, other larger players, whether domestic or global, wherein that IP is plugging a hole, I think the exit opportunities definitely increase. And we have successfully demonstrated that in our own portfolio. I mean, in the current fund, we have a company called Steradian Semiconductors, right? Solid IP they had built for autonomous vehicle. And when we went to raise funds, Renesas Electric of Japan, who is the largest auto electronics OEM, acquired the company, right? It was a deep tech company. It was pretty much pre-revenue, but it was a solid exit. So if you can't scale, and that risk is always there in deep tech, at least you have to try your best to identify meaningful IP.
So you have to be lovable and likable, and willing to share your returns with other people. So, Madhav.
So, since we also have the ability to create a pipeline, we take some very early stage bets on emerging science in labs and universities, which we co-fund with BIRAC. So we've got a pooled fund with BIRAC, which allows to invest in early stage science. And I think the failure rate is high, and we're not afraid of that. But about 15% of them do eventually have sort of translated into early and mid-stage technology. So that's one way we're building our pipeline. Of course, we work with incubators like SINE around the country. But we've also seen a very interesting source coming from universities in North America and Europe in particular, where there's a lot of research happening in areas of public health where the patients are in India. So we're now also building a bridge between science and translational research, science happening anywhere in the world, translational research and product development in India, so that it's customized, fit for purpose, and scalable.
All right, thank you. Now that you guys covered, SINE, that was a common theme with your response. So that gives you a very good segue into, kind of talking about SINE. So, what's your experience with IITB and SINE? Of course, you can give an inside out, and probably Jatin and Madhav can give an outside in view of what's been your experience in working with SINE.
I'm an insider in many ways, so it's obviously been a very good experience, but it has been a very good experience. I think if I just look at the quality of startups that I've seen emerge and the change that I've seen in the last 20 years, it's phenomenal. Today, we've started actually having our team come down here, do a review of the startups, see which startups we want to track and, track them. So it's become a very valuable source of deal flow. And I think we are Series A investors, so we don't invest at the stage at which SINE incubates. But today, because SINE has access to funding and so many other things that SINE provides its entrepreneurs, many of them are ready for us to fund. And I think we'll see if I project in the next 5-10 years, we'll see a lot more of our portfolio companies actually emerging from SINE. It's been a very good incubator.
And Jatin, if you can.
Yes, so I've been.
Jatin should give the other side of the picture.
Yeah. So I'm not an alumni, of course, and so I've been associated with SINE since 2016, pretty much. So it's been 8-9 year journey. And obviously, the quality of startups that I've seen, has increased dramatically over the years. And I think the academia industry connect, which actually, a few years back was a major issue I felt, in the Indian context, which is where we need to sort of replicate the US model. I think that has also improved. Like, SINE pushes us to kind of mentor companies, even where, let's say we are never going to invest, right? It's the equivalent of the pro bono thing in let's say, law firms. So that kind of program, I think we have been, SINE has invited bunch of, real life investors on their IC, so that, that besides, obviously they have a pool of funding where, the commercialization may or may not matter that much, but they definitely have a pool where the commercialization and the scaling up matters, where they've put, in the IC committee, a lot of VC investors. So I think, it's been great, yeah.
Madhav?
So I think it's all been said, but from our point of view, we're relatively new to our relationship with SINE. What we like is SINE has boldly gone where many incubators have not gone. And I think the diversity of the companies that SINE is supporting is fairly significantly different. That sets it apart. But also a lot of the companies that SINE is supporting are first of their kind in the sectors that they're working in. So I think there is a certain ability to also be an early spotter of opportunity and incubate it. And a few companies have been here for just about as long as SINE has been in existence, which also shows that SINE is willing to stay the course. I think the opportunity that SINE has now is to look to the future to see where are the emerging challenges or where are the emerging areas that we probably still don't have full line of sight of, and how can you play that?
You kind of preempted my next
exactly.
question.
Okay.
If SINE has to look at next phase of their journey, so what are those 2 or 3 things that they can look at?
So I think for me, a lot now hinges around addressing the impact of climate change. And that can, I think, disaggregate into so many areas: health, nutrition, material science. And SINE is probably better placed than many other incubators because you're sitting side by side with IIT Bombay. So if that translational research to incubation link can be created, I think SINE is onto something for the next, not just for the next decade, but probably for the next century.
Jatin?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the academia industry connect has improved, but there is, of course, always further room for improvement. Besides being next to IIT Bombay, SINE also has the advantage of being in the financial capital of the country, right? And among all the institutes or incubators that we have dealt with as a fund, I think I find that the most here. But certainly, I think there is more scope for, to deepen that. Just like I said, that's one area where we should copy, like, those Me Too models in the startup ecosystem. I think that's a model we need to sort of deepen. And that's one thing that can be done. And also I think, in terms of the product market fit and this, just the sense of commercialization and scale up in some of the founders that are incubated. But again, it's improved a lot, I think, but there's always more that can be done.
Nothing really to add, I think.
Okay. So that brings me to the last question. The success story from SINE in your portfolio. If you want to pick one, or maybe you can go till 3, you want to highlight.
No, so we don't yet have one.
Okay. Jatin?
We missed SEDIMAC.
Okay, that's an anti-portfolio. I mean,
Yeah.
that works. You can cover anti-portfolio also. That's
Yes.
the one that you really wanted, but you couldn't do it.
SEDIMAC is the one. I mean, we actually went a whole hog. We were in final documentation stage. Some regulatory issue that was pointed out in the legal diligence, very minor, but at that time we got very scared, and we were a US India fund at that time, and therefore we had US GPs also, and they got very scared with this regulatory risk. So finally the investment didn't happen. Of course, Shashi, the entrepreneur and professor, is a very good friend of the firm still. But what really made me feel very small after that was this regulatory risk got compounded for 75,000 rupees. The potential liability could have been $6 million, which would have wiped out the entire investment.
Jatin?
Yeah, so I think I touched upon that earlier. Obviously, our main success story is Atomberg. We were the first institutional investor in Atomberg, from their seed, pretty much the pre-series A stage. We are invested out of Atomberg in both our funds, and it's now part of our crossover fund. The other example is Bellatrix that I mentioned, the first space tech investment that we made. We had actually done the commercial evaluation in terms of talking to the Honeywells and Airbuses of the world for whether if this really works out, is that viable. But we also wanted to do the tech diligence, that we had shared with, the aerospace department. In fact, I think SINE also ended up liking, and like I said, we made a co-investment together. In terms of the anti-portfolio company, it's IdeaForge. Of course, they were right across from Atomberg, their factory, and, we were introduced both through SINE and through the Atomberg founders. So that is one that we missed, yeah.
Madhav?
We haven't got anything with SINE yet, but the jury's out on that.
Anti-portfolio? So far, nothing.
Nothing yet.
Okay. All right. So that was all I had. I think we have probably 3 more minutes. Any questions? Okay. If you can introduce yourself and ask a question, please.
My name is Dr. Harsh Sethi. We are also incubated by SINE IIT Bombay. So as Madhav sir pointed out that next 10 years would be climate tech and material science. My question to you is that normally deep tech means AI, ML, AR, VR. But if you talk of deep tech, it also means material sciences. And for the seed stage, they need a lot of capital financing, capital investments. In India, how is this coming up? How is it shaping up for investments in these deep tech companies in material science and climate tech at a seed stage? Thank you.
So I mean, so for us, whatever you mentioned as part of deep tech, deep science is part of our theme. And I'd give an example of 2 of our companies earlier. One is a company called Bioprime, which is into nanomaterials. So they have molecules that would improve crop yield, which is kind of depressed due to either climate change or overuse of chemicals and fertilizers, right? So that is one investment we have made. In fact, the next round after we came in was led by a European fund, right? So there is, both domestic and overseas capital available. We have another company called Nopo Technologies. It's based in Bangalore. So they're also nanomaterials. They make single wall carbon nanotubes, which potentially into very high conductivity, smaller form factor, replacing, composite materials. Either whether it's in semiconductor industry, in healthcare devices, in EV, these are the use cases. So there is definitely, while it's still early, there is a bit of understanding. In fact, there are a couple of funds that I'm aware of are specifically, in the indigenization of some of these themes that have been set up and capital has been allocated.
Thank you. I think it's a popular panel.
I have questions. Hi, I'm Ajay Sethi, work with SINE and DSSE, and I'm Axel Partners. A question for you guys is, if you have both deep tech investments and non-deep tech investments, based on your current valuation, is deep tech versus non-deep tech IRR? Can you compare? Is one doing better than the other within your internal calculation?
So what's the performance benchmark?
So for us at least, Pixel has been an outlier. It's the deep tech space company that we've done, and if I compare it with all other companies, its IRR is certainly better than all others.
At the fund level, if you have done 2-3, would you be still say that deep tech are doing better than non-deep tech, or?
So we are only 6 years into deep tech. Blue Armor, Pixel was the second one that we did. It has clearly outperformed all our companies. But if I look at the underlying revenue and performance, Ati Motors in a year of the investment has raised its Series B, grown from 45 robots to 120 robots, etc. So I think the IRRs will catch up as these companies show these performances, but it's very early to see the markups. In Pixel, we have seen the markup, and it's clearly an outlier in IRR.
Yeah, thank you, Samir. I think that's all we have.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Can we have Hari Tiwari, please, to present our panelists with a small token of appreciation? Clear that the road to success isn't just paved with innovation and funding, strategic vision, long-term commitment, and a collaborative approach across industries is necessary. Thank you so much for that.